Welcome to the Manifestation Method. I'm your host, Ayelet Polonsky, therapist, coach, and Jewish neo-shaman. Here we blend the wisdom of psychology, spirituality, and Kabbalah to empower you with tools for living your most authentic life, filled with love, abundance, and healing. Through somatic, narrative, and hypnotherapy, I've developed the Manifestation Method to guide your soul's transformation and the realization of your true self. Let's rise together. To dive deeper into manifesting your most authentic life, visit ayeletpolonsky.com. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Manifestation Method podcast. Today, I'm going to give you a little sneak preview behind the scenes of my journey. A to Z, no filters, just jumping into who I am, where I came from, and weaving in a lot of manifestation tidbits, pieces of advice, formulas of how I got from being the type of kid that I was, which will soon be revealed, to how I actually became the person who I am today.
Absolutely. We're so excited.
Yay.
The transformation too, because I think so many people think when they need to, when they're on the journey of beginning their manifesting journey, like thinking that they need to immediately jump from where they're at to the vibration where you are or someone else who's an expander for them is. And that can be really intimidating. And it's just important to be reminded that it's all a journey and it's all a process. And even where you're at now, you're still manifesting new things in your life and, building those steps and creating really amazing things for yourself that you haven't even found yet.
Totally. And I am actually really happy that you said that, because I think a lot of people come to me and they think that like manifestation is reserved for like a designated few people who were born as manifestors. And that is just so far from the truth. Like my upbringing and the type of emotional internal world that I experienced as a child into my teenage years is drastically different from who I am today and the inner space that I carry and try to hold today. You know, the little 4-year-old, 6-year-old Ayelet comes out every once in a while.
Totally.
But like, that's the thing. That's what makes it a journey. And it's so fun to just constantly be on this journey and be peeling layers and layers and layers of this beautiful lotus flower called life, right? Because I'm just constantly being revealed to myself. And just when I think I've made it or I figured something out, boom, like I'm learning and developing, exploring new assets and facets of myself. So I always say I'm a teacher and student of manifestation.
Absolutely. And one thing too that makes me think about was someone asked recently at one of manifestation mindsets events in LA, like, why even bother with manifesting? If God is in control of everything, why should we even bother trying to, I guess, like her point of view was control the journey or control the process. And I think something that is, and we were talking about like in Kabbalah, how like Hashem, like we're all finger puppets of Hashem, and Hashem is experiencing God's self through our experience. And life just becomes so much more vibrant when we decide to co-create with God versus take a back seat and be just like that leaf in the wind, and things get so much more fun and interesting. And also to be reminded too, like, where Ayelet was in the beginning, having these desires that are seemingly so disconnected, from the circumstance, being like, oh, I want to create this or that. And it's like, 3-year-old Ayelet or like high school Ayelet or whatever, or even India Ayelet. And this is such an irrational desire that I have, really realizing too, like those desires are like breadcrumbs that God is giving us to live and build our best life. So I guess let's start with like Ayelet, you were born.
I was, thank the good Lord.
Yeah.
And I am living life fully.
Yeah.
So, what a lot of people probably don't know is I was born in New York City. People often meet me and they're like, are you from India? Are you from Nepal? Are you from South America? And
Yeah, she's from Mars, ladies and gentlemen.
I am from Venus, actually.
There she goes.
But no, I was born on the Upper West Side, New York
Mhm.
City, moved to Jersey when I was 1, so I am like a purebred Jersey girl who always tells people I'm from New York. And I was born to immigrant parents. So my mom is originally from Argentina and my
Mhm.
dad is from Israel. And they met when my mom was a teenager. She moved to Israel, met my dad there. They fell in love and wanted to live out the American dream. So came in their 20s to America. And yeah, one thing led to another, and I was born.
Then she came right out of the womb, manifesting right when that doctor spanked her, ladies and gentlemen.
Right? I even manifested no labor. I just came poof. I just
Yeah,
popped.
bam, there she is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. And then what was like growing up for you? Did you grow up in a spiritual environment or a self-aware environment? What kind of, I guess, like also so much of our of the manifestation journey starts from like how we were parented and our inner child self. So like there's so much conditioning around that.
Okay, so let's go there, but I do want to premise it
Mhm.
because, you know, I want I want to just honor and acknowledge my parents. If we're going to go there and talk about my upbringing, I just want to honor, acknowledge the fact that, I think not just my parents, but their whole generation, their priorities were just very different from ours. And so while our generation, the generation that I was brought up in, we kind of have the luxury of exploring our inner world and dealing with our emotional states and going to the therapy, going to the somatic work, going to the sound baths, going to the cacao ceremonies.
Absolutely. And we also just like even going to therapy, like regular therapy is so much less stigmatized than our parents, you know.
That's what I'm saying, exactly. Like,
Mhm.
my parents didn't grow up in a generation where therapy was normalized. And also their priorities were different. Like they were more like honed in on survival and making a living and supporting their kids and also just like taking it all the generations back, right? Because epigenetics show that we're impacted up to 7 generations, if not more, prior to us poof coming to planet Earth, right? So
Yeah.
we're really impacted by all these generations. And so I don't blame my parents for what I got or didn't get. Okay. Because what I do want to say is they showered my siblings and I with so much of our needs being met, our physical needs. Okay. So we went on vacations all the time. We always had food and on our table. We went on, we had a beautiful home. Like
Mhm.
and that was where their mindset was. But they were not necessarily equipped. And I want to blame it on that generation. Not blame,
Yeah.
but
They just didn't have the time or the tools.
they just didn't we'll keep it at that. They didn't have the time or the tools to really understand how all this like secure attachment parenting, right? Like regulating your children when they're having big feelings. It just wasn't the generation. Like that generation was like buckle up your bootstraps and get it
Totally.
done. Stop making a
Yeah.
big deal, like what's the
Yeah.
and I think that for me and my spiritual architecture, like the way my soul chose to come into this body as like a super energetic being with a sensitive disposition, um, it kind of met me in a place in my childhood where I found myself needing to self-regulate a lot.
Mhm.
Um, which eventually led to a lot of internal chaos. Like, I remember my childhood being one where I was in a perpetual fight or flight state, like, and that kind of spiraled into me as a teenager trying to experience inner peace, but not really
Mhm.
knowing how to acquire inner peace because I was never taught the tools.
Right.
It I did what I saw around me, what I knew how to do, which was, okay, find a quick fix, find that quick relief to that emotional turmoil. So that
Mhm.
manifested for me in the form of like shopping. I went from one shopping spree to another and I found my inner consolation, like one credit card swipe after another. And
Wow.
without knowing that feel good feeling that comes
Yeah.
when we go shopping, right, is
Yeah.
a quick fix and not a permanent solution.
Yeah.
And I was still looking for that permanent solution because I was like wishy-washy, constantly finding myself in this place of like, why do I not feel like my soul is like meant to be here on planet Earth, right? Like something
Mhm.
felt off for me. And it also led me to a lot of partying, New York City, nightclubs, lounges, bottle service, right? I had that
Yeah.
whole period where, again, it's like one escape after another until finally, when I turned 20, that was like my spiritual awakening. And I feel very
Mhm.
blessed to have had my spiritual awakening at such a young age. And I also just want to say, like, I now look at my history, like my past, my childhood, with so much gratitude. And in my own meditations and in my own therapeutic processes, I always say, like, thank you, thank you, thank you to my parents and to all the tools they did or didn't have, because it literally is the catalyst that got me into the type of work that I'm doing now, right? Because I would not be so passionate about cracking the codes to healing, to
Yeah.
growth, spiritual alchemy, if
Mhm.
it wasn't for that type of upbringing that caused me the turmoil that it caused me.
Right. Do you remember too? That's actually so interesting. I remember also feeling like if I could pinpoint when my spiritual awakening was, I think it was also when I was 20 years old. Like it might just be the age and the circumstance or whatever. But I think something that I've been thinking about now that I'm in my 30s is there's like that initial spiritual awakening, which I guess I would describe it as really like you can really internalize like you are a part of something greater than yourself. Like that's how I would um I guess constitute a spiritual awakening. And then after that though, a lot of the times we think we're going to have a spiritual awakening and then that's it. You're enlightened or you're a fixed state of yourself and we forget this other whole other part of life, that life keeps going after having spiritual awakenings. And how was that for you? Like what would you say or constitute as your spiritual awakening and how that put you on the path towards going to India and then like returning to Israel?
That's a great question. So the way that it happened for me was actually pretty tragic.
Mhm.
And that is kind of the path for some people towards their spiritual awakening, is they experience some sort of like total breakage. And so when I was 20, I had woken up to like 80 something missed calls and messages, and only to find out that a friend of mine and like my clique, my group of friends then, um,
Mhm.
he met up with a bunch of motorcycle guys the night before at a local Starbucks, and her
Mhm.
best friend had convinced her to get on the back of a bike to go into New York City to grab a quick bite to eat. And despite my friend, her name was Dawn, despite her gut feeling telling her, like, I have a bad feeling about this, I don't want to get on the back of that bike. And
Mhm.
her best friend was like, it'll be quick, we'll come right back, nothing's gonna happen, you'll be fine.
Mhm.
She like didn't listen to her own intuitive knowing, and
Mhm.
she kind of like caved to the peer pressure, got on the back of the bike, and as they were crossing the George Washington Bridge, the biker like did some sort of bike trick and slid on some oil, and the bike went flying, and she
Oh.
landed like head first.
Oy.
And her best friend was on the bike behind her, like jumps off the bike, holds Dawn in her hand, and Dawn looks up at
Mhm.
her best friend and says, I love you and it's not your fault. And then she died in her best friend's arms.
Oh my God.
Super tragic. And
Yeah.
I remember finding out about this, and like it was as real as the conversation we're having right now. Okay. It was like this voice in my head. I get these like voices in my head sometimes.
Mhm.
I call it like Ruach HaKodesh, right? Like I just
Yeah.
it's like this like channeling of spirit through the divine, and it speaks through me and it guides me, right? We started this conversation talking about listening to that divine guidance even though you don't
Yeah.
really know where it's going to take you. But I
Mhm.
really believe when you listen, then it guides you to the next evolution of your soul's manifestation. And so
Totally.
that voice in my head said, Ayelet, you've been alive for 20 years, but
Mhm.
you have not yet begun to live. And I remember that moment. It was like a turning point for the rest of my life. It was like the
Wow.
turning point. And I said, Ayala, you are committed. You are committed to understanding why God put you on this planet, creating some sort of like purpose out of it so that Dawn did not die in vain. So I bring her up a lot in my talks in order to
Mhm.
like honor her death and know that like she didn't die in vain, and her story
Yeah.
live on.
It's so important also to just honoring people who have passed away, like our loved ones in our life. And that's such a testament also to your method and your success as a teacher. by just incorporate like having that integrity. Like I know we talk about that a lot, having integrity and having just the integrity of dedicating something to someone who we loved who's passed away, or yeah, just that really I think elevates so much of the work behind manifestation method.
Yeah, and I really believe in like spirit guides and light
Mhm.
workers and just like
Mhm.
doing my own meditations. Like I always source it in source energy, like in the
Mhm.
divine, and I
Yeah,
see like angelic beings as the interface between
absolutely.
and divinity. And so I'm always channeling, and I really feel like Dawn is constantly like on my shoulder, just being my cheerleader and just kind of giving me like downloads of inspiration of like what's going on in the upper realms.
Yeah.
Like, I'm downloading all the codes through her, so I re
Yeah.
yeah, I really wanna
Friends in
honor
high places.
friends
Thanks,
and
Don.
totally, totally. So for me, the spiritual awakening wasn't so much coming from this place of, like, feeling like I'm part of something beyond me, at least for me,
Mhm.
although I do agree with
Mhm.
that definition of a spiritual awakening. For me, it was more this, like, existential crisis, right? Like,
Mm.
oh my gosh, like life cannot just be one shopping spree after another, one nightclub after another. That cannot be the way I live the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That's so empty and meaningless. And I was determined to start. So that experience led me straight to Barnes and Nobles to the self-help section because I had no idea where to start. I didn't know who to
Right.
talk to. I just knew I needed something. So
Barnes&
I'm
and
walking.
Noble honestly is like a portal, especially, like, 2000s, like, that was the portal to the, like, 5th dimension.
When I started seeing all of the like Barnes and Nobles like start closing down, I think especially
No,
around
it's
COVID,
so intense.
it
Like,
was
a
really
part of my soul died.
right, because like, just going to these bookstores, sitting there and, like, reading and just
Yeah.
it's just so yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
such a vibe, it was a time.
It was a time. So, back to that time, which was it seems like forever ago,
The Barnes& and Noble era.
the Barnes& and Noble era, I'm walking through the self-help section, and a book by Deepak Chopra titled Buddha falls off
Mhm.
the shelf. So I took it as a sign, I took it home, started reading, and it, like, opened up my consciousness to all these other spiritual paths, like one of them being like Hinduism and Buddhism.
Mhm.
And so one thing spiraled after another. And, I went to college in New York City, and at that point had already read every single book on the self-help from the self-help section.
Yeah.
And I found myself at a Shabbat meal Friday night, and
Mhm.
I wasn't keeping Shabbat then. And there was this guy sitting next to me at the meal, and we're like passing our phone under the table. I don't know if I should say that,
Yeah.
but we're passing our phones at the table, and we start connecting, and I notice he's wearing what's called rudraksha beads on his.
Mhm.
Rudraksha beads are prayer beads that they use in the Far East to help the mind focus on a single mantra over and over and over again. And we start talking, and we slowly built a relationship. We started dating, and he had introduced me to Swamiji, his guru from India.
Wow.
And I remember, I,
Ayelet, do you ever say which guru it was specifically?
uh, I have an interesting relationship with the guru.
Okay.
I have an interesting relationship with the guru.
Mhm.
Maybe later we'll go in and edit this, and I'll come in and I'll give like a name. I'll drop a name.
Yeah.
There's
Is it Sai Baba?
no,
Okay, okay.
no, 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 no. There's a lot of controversy that goes on
Got
with like
it.
gurus,
Yeah.
and I'm still in a place now. All these years, I mean, it's been 8 years since I left India,
Mhm.
um, and I've just heard a lot of different accounts of things that he's done. I mean, not to make it about that, but a
No,
lot.
but it's also too it's like the teachings and then the teacher and then, like, where does that line, you know?
Which is a whole conversation, but one thing I can say that I'm super grateful for that time period in my life, I ended up spending 6 years in India, uh,
Mhm.
because it really taught me discernment. It
Yeah.
taught me how to look at any guru, any teacher, any coach, any person who positions themselves in a position of authority,
Mhm.
and I kind of learned to really, really read between the lines to assess like where is this person coming from and where does their authenticity lie, like do they have integrity, and why are they doing what they're doing, because I don't think humans are perfect. I'm not perfect, and we all have our flaws, and we all come with like the little ego parts and all of that.
Mhm.
And I can
Mhm.
respect that, but for me it's really important to be led by people who are really doing what they're doing for a greater cause, right? Not just to like make a lot of money or get really famous. Like they really genuinely care about like the consciousness of planet Earth and
Right.
elevating the frequency of the planet. And that to
Mhm.
me feels very like purposeful.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, so I was dating this guy and we were watching a lot of Swamiji's videos at the time. And one night I go to bed and Swamiji comes to me in a dream and he's sitting at the foot of my bed and I remember seeing him in his vivid orange robe,
Mhm.
like crystal clear, like as though it was like as real as this conversation is right now. It's like and he's doing energy healing on me at the foot of my bed and I wake up and I'm like that did not feel like a dream. So I went to the guy I was dating at the time and he said, "Before you tell me what the dream was about, watch this video." And he sends me a video of Swamiji saying, "If I come to you in a dream and you see me in vivid orange and I'm doing energy healing on you, rest assured it is not just your unconscious coming to the surface. It is
Wow.
me coming into dream space and welcoming you and inviting you to come meet me in person."
Wow.
So at that point, I was like, I can't ignore that. That was too synchronistic. So
Yeah.
I sold all my designer purses and shoes and so much stuff to
Mhm.
at this point I'm 22. I was 22 years old. I got on a plane
Mhm.
to meet him for a 21-day yoga meditation retreat. And there was this like nectar of devotion that I wanted to drink because I saw everyone around me drinking the nectar of devotion
Right.
that I didn't get what I wanted after 21 days. So I'm like, let me stay a little bit longer and see what's up here, like
Mhm.
experience
Mhm.
magic. Fast forward 6 years, and I really feel like it was some part of my incarnation in this body needed to live out a big time period in India to
So
get what
you
I got.
stayed in India for 6 years.
So it was a lot of on and off. So I had a
Okay.
retreat company. I had a retreat company at the time.
Mhm.
I mean, I
Mhm.
spent the majority of the time in India, but I was
Yeah.
also like a direct devotee of the guru. So I was traveling the world teaching his teachings.
Wow. That must have been a wild experience. Talk about a trip.
I mean, I feel like that's a podcast in and of itself. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what I learned and experienced in India, because a lot of the stuff, if I were to disclose it here on the podcast, listeners just wouldn't believe me. They'd think like, who is this crazy lady with the big
Yeah,
hat?
we have to ease our listeners in.
Totally.
We'll
But
do
we'll
a we okay, cool. We'll also ask questions too on Instagram. We'll be like, "What questions do you have about India?" And see, because I know for me, like, I have a ton of questions, and for every one question, there's, like, a million more, so
Totally. And also just like the deep spiritual, psychological work that we did there was profound, like
Mhm.
profound. Like I can't throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes
Right.
to the guru. Like,
Yeah.
yes, there are these accusations, but at the same time, like I can't deny what I received and what I learned and what I felt and how much I grew.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of who I am today, I have to thank that time period of my life for. It was really,
Mhm.
really profound.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's so wild. Okay, so then now we're coming to the climax of the India story, which um, I think probably people are more familiar with, is you having like an awakening within an awakening, like being in India and having that awakening to like just pivot, I guess I could say.
Yeah, so this is where like listening to that still small voice, like the whisper of your soul or your intuition, call it what you will. Like this is where I really, really started to hone in on deep listening,
Hmm.
right? So it's kind of for me, like there was an experience that helped me navigate or differentiate when I'm so much in my head and I'm letting like my fears into the driver's seat versus when I'm like, when I land in my body and I
Yeah.
access my soul and I can ask, is this next decision in my life coming from a place that awakens my soul? Am I following
Hmm.
my excitement? Am I following my purpose? So what
Yeah.
happened was I attended the largest festival of consciousness on the planet called Kumbh
Hmm.
Mela.
Okay.
And so it's in the middle of nowhere, India. It's in the desert, and there's like thousands of gurus
Hmm.
for miles. Okay, thousands of gurus, and all of their disciples come to this festival where you're promised enlightenment. So of course I'm like, oh, I get enlightenment. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Um, I can't claim that I'm enlightened, but
Right. It's a process.
it was definitely an enlightening experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Anyways, this festival is 50 million, 50 million Hindus come from all over.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like Mecca, but for Hindus. It's like
Guys, that's
really,
more people than on Manhattan.
yeah. It was packed. It was packed. And so my camp with Swami Ji had 10,000 people, just my camp alone. Okay.
Mhm.
So imagine this massive structure, this massive tent holding
Mhm.
10,000 people all meditating and creating coherence at the exact same
Wow.
time. It was very powerful. And so there was at one point where Swamiji said, everybody has a 30-minute break, and then we're going to reconvene for the next meditation session. So we all were exhausted because we were doing deep, deep, deep inner work. We were doing like real spiritual alchemy. Okay, I'll tell you some of the things we were doing. Okay, we were
Yeah.
levitation. Levitation's a very real phenomenon.
Okay,
Okay.
yes.
And people say, like, did you see it or did you experience it? No, I levitated. Like, my body actually lifted off the ground and we were completely clean. There was no psychedelics, no
Right.
drugs, nothing
Right.
like alcohol, no onions, no mushrooms, like
Yeah.
nothing can activate those parts of the brain.
Yeah.
So I was very much sober and aware and alert.
Yeah.
And I did it hundreds of times that it was a real experience. We were also alchemizing crystals, like crystals would materialize, sacred powders would materialize out of
Wow,
nowhere,
yeah.
mouths and our hands on our shit. Like it was really, really powerful.
Mhm.
And so
This reminds me of, like, like old school Kabbalah, like Rabbi Akiva. Like, just the things that our sages would talk about too, levitating, with, like, having things materialize out of thin air. There's so much crossover.
so this is what's really amazing, that by the time I got to India, and I know that's like a whole other section of what we're
Mhm.
going to talk about, but by the time I got to Israel, not India, by the time I got to Israel, and I started learning from, my tradition, like the tradition I was born into, and
Mhm.
opening like holy books and learning with like Kabbalists, Mekubalim, and
Yeah.
I'm seeing that, oh, everything I experienced in India was not
It's
nothing.
not
Like
unique. Yeah, and
it's
it's also
really
it's not nothing, and it's not unique only to one. It's not, like, gate kept by one practice.
totally, totally, like definitely exists in our holy scriptures as well.
Mhm.
Anyways, okay, I'm regressing. So the guru said you have 30 minutes to take a nap, or to do whatever you want. So I grab my backpack, I use it as a pillow, I curl up into a little ball, and we're all just like 10,000 of us napping in a meditation hall. And suddenly I hear this like loud banging noise. And I open my eyes, and the walls of this massive tent structure are like ripping open, and water and winds and debris starts like flooding the meditation hall. And that's when we all realized like we were in a very real like cyclone tornado type of situation. So imagine like 10,000 people chaotically running to two tiny little exit doors,
Mhm.
and this whole structure is starting to like shake. It's about to collapse. And I said to myself, if I follow the stampede, I'm done for. Like this thing's going to
Yeah.
collapse dead. So my plan B was I slid under the foundation of the tent because at this
Uh-huh.
point the floor was getting all muddy. So I slid under the foundation of the tent. I find myself outside, middle of this hurricane, tornado, whatever it was, debris flying everywhere, people screaming. It was like a scene out of like, the first scene in The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Like it was just
Literally
pure,
a Wizard of Oz moment.
like, yeah. And I said, if I don't find shelter, but remember, we were in the desert. If I don't find shelter, then like I could die here. So I
Mhm.
see in front of me a massive transportation truck. So I
Mhm.
slid under the truck, and I'm sitting there and I'm like begging for my life, begging for my life. And apparently, a woman, I guess she followed me under. I didn't even notice her. And she's sitting next to me, this older woman with piercing blue eyes. She like whispers into my ear. She says, "Don't worry, darling. At least if we die here, we die with our guru."
You're
And
like,
I'm
"Thanks?"
like, "Yeah, thanks, no thanks." Like, I legit am like,
Yeah.
"Okay." That's when I knew. That's
Mhm.
when I knew that, like, my soul was in the wrong place at the
Mhm.
wrong time with the wrong whatever. It just was
Yeah,
not
you're
meant to
like, "I have ridden this train as far as it goes, and it's time
ex
to get off."
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Because I was like, "You know what? You might be ready to die with your guru lady, but, like, I have a
I
whole
still got life to live.
about life to live." Totally.
Yeah.
So I like close my eyes, and I literally remember saying like, "Dear God, if you can hear me, I need a miracle. I don't know where I'm meant to go or what I'm meant to do, but I am surrendered to your divine guidance." And then the next thing I did, don't ask me where this came from, but I remember seeing my grandparents say this prayer in Hebrew when I was younger growing up. So I covered my eyes and I said, Shema Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And within seconds, the tornado stopped. It was quiet. And I really believe that, like, that's the moment where I really understood in the power of manifestation, the
Yeah.
power of sound vibration and frequency, and
Mhm.
when we align our intention with the frequency of what we're feeling, right? Like I was so clear, if God saves me from this, then I am totally surrendered to his
Yeah.
divine guidance. Like I'm not in control anymore.
So,
And the
just for our listeners, we're not saying that Ayelet stopped a tornado, but we're also not saying that she didn't not stop a tornado with the Shema, okay?
Look, on the one hand, like, would I like to believe I stopped a tornado? That'd be super cool, but I don't think I'm
Yeah.
that powerful. But
Right,
but I
right.
do believe in the power of co-creation, and I
Mhm.
do and you know, even in our sources, like our Kabbalistic sources, we're told that the whole world is created just for me. So everything is just this, like, my whole experience of reality is could be just my projection.
Yeah.
Who knows? Like we're multidimensional beings living in this multidimensional reality, right?
Right.
So who knows if like it's all real, whatever, we won't go there. But
Right, but it's also like that thing, like the two pieces of paper in the pocket. Like the world is created for me and I am ashes and dust. Like it really is that dichotomy. Making
yeah,
yourself also just totally annulling yourself, being like, God, like baby girl is under a truck. Like you can get me out of this, and whatever, even if I don't make it, like just whatever it is, I just surrender. That's so
it's
powerful.
totally. And like, you know, those moments where you go to like some sort of spiritual class and you feel like the teacher is like speaking directly to your soul. Like
Mhm.
everything about that class is like meant for you. Right.
Yeah.
So like I can't help but think that like every piece of that puzzle that happened at that festival happened for the sole purpose of getting me up and out of India. And I have so much love and respect for the country as a whole and for the people. I made the
Yeah.
most amazing friends and had the most amazing experiences. But you know, this experience, this festival experience, the tornado experience, I believe, is the catalyst that led me to Israel, led me to meeting my soulmate.
Okay, so you're under the truck, you say the Shema that stops the tornado, and then what? Like, you're in the middle of the desert, like, how did you get out of that desert?
Well, then it became, well, I
Like, what
really,
happened afterward? Did, like, the, like, emergency people, like, emergency rescue people come? Were there dead people around? Like, what was
yeah.
that like?
So people did lose their lives and the whole place was like destroyed. So in India,
Wait,
there's this,
was the guru okay? Like, were the gurus okay?
yeah, they were okay.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. I
Yeah.
know. I know. Yeah. In fact, Swamiji did tell us after that he did stop the tornado. So who knows? Who knows? Who
It
knows?
was either my money's on you, but it could have been Swamiji. Swamiji's number 2.
There's this concept in India called seva, which is like
Mhm.
doing volunteer work to help with like your soul's evolution, right? So like they called it seva, where everyone kind of got together and helped like rebuild the camp. So a
Mhm.
lot of our efforts went there into like this like selfless act of service.
Yeah.
So
Which is
that's
true, that is a real thing.
totally, totally. So that's how I spent the rest of my time at Kumbh Mela.
Mhm.
But
And the whole time were you just thinking like, "I gotta get out of here, like, I'm gonna do my seva, and then, like, I gotta figure out my next steps," or what was that like in what was your thought process?
I really wanted to leave before the seva, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I just wanted out.
Yeah.
Like
I
like
would
my
too, I don't blame you.
yeah, like my nervous system was like, I almost just died, like that's not okay. I just
Yeah.
I've now experienced like near death experiences a number of times in my life to realize like the place I want to be the most when my life is being threatened is like back with my parents and where I call home.
Yeah.
Ironically.
I know, right? Me too. It's such a irony.
It's a real irony, because it's like I had to like seek safety as a child and now like
Yeah.
safety is in some weird way still, It's a thing.
That's for,
Um,
another episode, ladies and gentlemen.
Totally for another episode because it's a real psychological
It's
phenomenon.
yeah, and I think too, like, that's, like, real ascension is feeling that way about family. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're in India, you're doing seva.
Right. So one of my mentors who was there with me, she convinced me to stay and she was reassuring me that everything is divine and the fact that I'm okay and I'm safe, it's all for divine reason. So I got over it and I stayed, I was already like committed to that process and to that guru and to that community and was doing so much for that community as far as like spreading consciousness to the world at my retreats at whatever. Um so it wasn't immediate that I left.
Mhm,
However, it was the beginning of this like turning point internally for me where I
mhm.
just had this like inner knowing that I'm not meant to be here anymore. I'm
Yeah,
not meant to be here
time's
anymore.
up.
Time's up. And I
There's a
just didn't.
real concept of that too, like following the thread, of an experience, and sometimes that experience, it could be 30 years of one thread that you're following the end to, or a relationship or a job, and it could be something that is like 2 weeks, it could be 2 months, it could be 20 years, like but I just think that's so, like, incredible that part of the human experience is doing something that you're really called to do, and it's like you don't even know why you're doing it, and then but once you know the thread is up, it's like you just know, and to always trust that. It might not even be rational, but
I love that so much. It's kind of like being in the wrong relationship, knowing that,
Mhm.
like, and then at a certain point, like something just snaps and you're like, no, this is it. Now it's time. Now it's
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
But I love that concept. So fast forward, it only took me a few months. A few months went by, and the guru had invited 20 of us to this 4-month bus tour of southern India.
Mhm.
And so it was a week before the bus was going to depart from the ashram where I was staying.
Mhm.
I said, okay, let me go up north. I'll go to Bombay and hang out with some friends who have like a really nice place and a pool and a
Yeah.
chef.
And just,
Let
like, decompress from that crazy experience.
decompress from that crazy experience, but also like pre-decompress from like what was about to happen because we were about to live in a bus literally for four
Yeah.
months and maybe shower, maybe not. Like again,
Yeah.
another promise for enlightenment.
Yeah.
I don't mean to talk it down to it because there's so much truth and there's so much beauty in that
It's
path. It's
just
just
also a different level of like, I think about the concept of like betul, like making yourself like betul to Hashem. And there's just different ways that that looks like in different cultures. And I think like in Judaism, some people think it looks one way, like it could be a lifestyle where it's like you have 14 kids and live in a 2-bedroom apartment and Mea Sharim, like that could be someone's bittul, and then like another person's bittul is following their guru on a bus in India and not showering. Like, you know,
totally.
different strokes for different folks.
Totally, totally. And I really like to live my life from an inner place of like constant bittul, no matter what, whether
Mhm.
it is being devoted to a guru in India or whether it's living a more, Torah Jewish centered life in Israel. Like it's always listening to that like God voice inside of us, right? That God
Yeah,
particle that is always whispering to us. And when we get out of our own way, then we learn how to listen to it.
absolutely.
And I'm
Absolutely.
someone who I have to listen because, like, I don't like to stay in places where I'm like uncomfortable for too long. I really like to listen to that voice.
Yeah.
So I had a week before the bus was about to depart from the ashram. So I'm in Bombay and I'm sitting by the pool and I'm in my meditation, doing all my visualization stuff, all my manifestation work, which I had initially learned in India actually.
Mhm.
And while I'm in my meditation, this like voice keeps trying to interrupt my flow. So I keep trying to push away this voice and it keeps coming back and it gets stronger and louder and stronger and louder. So finally, at that point, I had spent like 8 hours a day blindfolded in meditation for 6 years. Like, I know that when something's coming in and trying to distract me, like, I need to listen. Like, there's
Mhm.
something trying to get me out. So I entertained this voice and it was super crisp, crystal clear. The voice said, Ayelet, leave this country now and go to Israel and don't look back. So within 30 minutes, I had a flight booked. The next morning, I get on a plane. I go to Israel. And mind you, at this point,
What
I
did
knew.
you tell Swamiji?
Oh, okay, so that's a great question. Nothing. I actually had to okay, this is what I mean when you listen to that, like, whisper of your soul, when you
Yeah.
follow your excitement, when you follow what you know is right, then
Mhm.
I really believe that the universe conspires in your favor and puts
Right.
all the pieces together to work out for you, which I really just wanna reassure people who are at this, like, choice point in their life, right? I get clients like this all the time, or people in my courses, they're always like, well, should I go this course or that course? Should I go this way or that way? Should I marry this guy or should I break up with him? Right? It's like
Yeah.
when you learn how to listen and get super clear, then literally there's nothing to be afraid of because you cannot fail. When you follow
Right.
your excitement, not when you follow a trauma response, not when you follow fear, but when you follow what you know is aligned for you, what's right
Mhm.
for you, the universe literally conspires in your favor. So check this, okay? I flew back to Bangalore, southern India, to the ashram.
Mhm. Mhm.
After being there for 6 years, I had a relationship with everyone at the ashram. There was nobody that I
Yeah.
didn't know.
Yeah.
My taxi pulls up to the gate. Now, I was arriving to the ashram to get my belongings to leave to go to
Mhm.
the airport.
Yeah.
I get to the gate. Now, my biggest fear was I was going to arrive to the ashram and everybody I knew, the whole community that I had built for myself over the course of 6 years, like all my friends,
Mhm.
if they saw me leave, the first thing they would have done was been like, I yell that you're out of your minds. Like, where are you going? We're leaving in a week for this bus tour that is supposed to be the most like sacred experience ever. Like, how could you not?
Yeah.
So I was a little bit nervous that they would succeed at convincing me like out of what my intuition clearly told me to do. So
Mhm.
I arrived to the gate of the ashram and there was a guard at the gate who I never met before. Okay. This has never happened in 6 years. I had
Yeah.
never met him before. I show him my tag, he lets me in. Not
Yeah.
only that, but Swamiji had called an all-out ashram meeting in the meditation hall for the entire everyone at the ashram. He's never
Yeah,
done.
so, like, no one was there.
No one was there. I was able to like sneak into my room, get my belongings, and leave
Amazing.
for it. So again, like boom, forehead kiss from God. Okay, like I'm being
Yeah.
attracted towards what was obviously right for me.
Mhm.
Now,
I
mind you,
wonder if Swamiji knew too. He was like, "This would be really hard for Ayelet, and I don't wanna get in her way, so I'm gonna call this meditation session." You know? Like, if he came to you in a dream, he probably was also like, "Her time is up. Like, I'm gonna set, like, this bird free."
it could be, it could be. You know what's interesting about you saying that is like ever since I left, I haven't heard from him at all. Like nothing, nothing, nothing. There was no where'd you
It was not like,
go?
"Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah."
Like, it just felt when it's right? It just felt like
Yeah.
what's needed to be done, and he must have known that because there was no, like, retaliation, no trying to get me back, nothing, which if you know the context, like, that's really weird because I was, like, like, I was in,
Right. You were like his right hand lady.
like, I was, like, spreading his wisdom all over the world, that's, like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, at this point, I'm like, I have nowhere to stay in Israel, like, I literally went without a plan, with nothing, and
Mhm.
so I called up a friend of mine who was originally from Jerusalem.
Mhm.
I was not observant, I was not keeping anything Jewy at the time, so
Yeah.
Jerusalem didn't feel aligned for me.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll go to Tel Aviv, right? It's like the party center of Israel. And
It's a
so
soft landing.
it's a super soft landing, and I said, "Okay, you know what? I'll go hang out with, like, other yogis, other meditators, drum circles, beach." And I called up a friend of mine from Jerusalem, and I said, I'm landing in Israel soon. I'm getting on a plane now. I don't want to be in Jerusalem. Do you know anyone who can like house me for a little bit? I'll pay rent, in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
And my friend goes, lucky for you, I just rented an apartment in Tel Aviv a week ago.
No
Empty,
way.
empty bedroom. Come and stay as long as you want. Okay. So again,
Wow.
another forehead kiss from the divine. Okay. Like I'm just
Mhm.
constantly being led.
Yeah.
One thing leads to another. And like that first month of me being in Tel Aviv, I was led to one Shabbat meal after another for a couple weeks. After about a month of living in Tel Aviv, it was like my soul just needed something so much deeper. Like I couldn't go from 6 years of like devoted spiritual practice in India to like Tel Aviv, which is like party center of Israel. Like Tel Aviv is a
Right.
beautiful city, but it just and honestly,
You
like
were just used to a different pace of life too. Tel Aviv is busy and yeah.
yeah, totally. There was something that just every Shabbat meal, I just felt like like a magnet, like pulled to Jerusalem, pulled
Mhm.
to Tzfat. Tzfat is like the epicenter of Kabbalah in the world, you know? And
Yeah.
I was thirsty to find out, what is it exactly that I learned in India? You know, and like where does it come down in our holy sources, like in Kabbalistic sources?
Yeah.
And I'm also just curious, like, does this stuff exist in my own backyard? Like, I traveled the world. At that point, I'd already also spent time in the Amazon jungles of Peru, learning from
Mhm.
the Pibo shamanic tribe,
That's
right?
gonna be another episode, ladies and gentlemen, so stay tuned.
So many teasers.
Yeah, so many teasers, so many lifetimes of Ayelet.
Because if we unpack each of these spiritual experiences, there's like so much wisdom, so much like psychological depth that I explored in all of these places that yes, they're all worthy of having their individual podcast.
Yeah, they all need their moment.
So after a month of living in Tel Aviv, I just went to Jerusalem, found an apartment, took the first apartment that was available,
Mhm.
and I went straight into this like seminary to the rabbi's wife, the rebbitzin who was running the seminary called Mayanot, and I look at her and I'm like, I just arrived from India a month ago and I'm here to learn. And she literally looks at me and she's like, are you sure you're at the right place? I'm just like, yeah, I'm here to learn. Like I'm here.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I'm like opening our holy books and just like it just felt like my soul was home. It just felt right. It just felt
Yeah.
right. So
And you were prepped too. You know, a lot of times I think so many people have a misconception about Hinduism or Eastern religions that it's really that there's no structure or there's no rules. And there are so many rules, like and so much structure. Like even like Zen Buddhists, if you're slouching in meditation, you'll get hit in the back with a stick or whatever. You know, there's a lot of boundaries and methodologies that aren't just I mean, I think in Western culture too, we take so much of that stuff and water it down to, you know, the New Age movement or, you know, take what you want and then leave the rest kind of a thing. But people forget, like, if you want to really transcend and reach a certain level, like, you have to have that discipline. And there's like a methodology to the disciplines. So it probably also was like really unnatural on for you being in Tel Aviv suddenly where there's no rules and it's a free for all and you might not have even realized you were living like in a very structured way before and then we're able to transfer that into halachic living, I guess.
yeah, totally. I mean, one thing I remember about living at the ashram was like men were on one side, women were on the other. Okay. Like there wasn't this like intermingling. I mean, during breaks there were, but it was very much like don't get distracted by the opposite sex. Like be very
Yeah.
much in your process. So we weren't sitting together. Also, if we were ever late to any of the processes, any of the
Mhm.
meditations, by 1 minute even, we'd have to do this whole completion process where we come back to integrity of like why we were late and like completing with that lack of integrity. It was very, very
Wow.
rigorous,
Yeah.
very rigorous. So plugging into a more like halachic Jewish system, it felt there was, even though like very much a free spirit,
Mhm.
there was something that felt safe in the structure for me, given like the internal chaos that I experienced growing up,
And
right?
also the upheaval too, like the literal chaos that you experience just coming from India or just uprooting your whole life. Like that's an extremely chaotic transition in and of itself.
Yes, exactly. So I needed something that felt safe. I needed something that felt contained. And so
Mhm.
everything just plugged in very beautifully. I mean, it's been 8 years since my journey in Israel started. And so there's
Mhm.
definitely been many like incarnations within this 8 years to come back to
Yeah.
that place in me where like I'm living this lifestyle in a way that is authentic to my soul's mission
Right.
on, right? So like I love to say like I've created this like tapestry way of living where I take the best of what I learned from India and the best of what I learned from South America and the best of
Mhm.
what I learned from Israel, and I get to make it mine. And I think that's where a lot of people get like tripped up in their journey is like
Mhm.
see things as very black or white versus making it something that we forget that this whole spiritual practice is about connection with the divine, connection with self. And
Mhm.
I think we get so bogged down with so much of what the rules say, and God forbid, I'm not saying that the rules are not important, they are, but I think
Right.
there's a place where we have to always come back to that center of integrity in ourselves and ask ourselves, like, where does this align with my being, who I am, my spiritual architecture, right? Because that ultra orthodox person who's living in Mea Shearim, like the epicenter of like Haredi ultra orthodox life in
Yeah.
does not have the same antecedents, the same history, the same experiences that me growing up not religious at all is going to have. So to assume that the way he's doing Jewish life is should be the
Yeah.
same I'm doing Jewish life is going to feel very constricting for me, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's also too an important thing to remember, like the life is a synthesis, right? Like not getting caught up on what I really find transformative about your journey too is not getting hung up on like, oh, I was this one way for so long and then now I'm going in a completely different direction. Like you just flow with it. I think sometimes we can really be our own worst enemy when we really need to pivot or transition in our lives. And it's like the story of who we were becomes a stumbling block for who we're supposed to become or what we're supposed to experience next. So this is like a great reminder just to, and with that trust with yourself and that trust with God, being able to move into these phases with our life with complete certainty that it's supposed to be this way and it doesn't make our past experiences less important and it doesn't make or that we have to judge ourselves from those past experiences either.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually something that I'm really grateful for my time in India for, because if there's one thing that I really began to understand on a deep experiential level is how to differentiate our past experiences or traumas from the meaning that we've attached to them. Like we did a
Mhm.
lot of unraveling in India of going actually like regressing, doing regression work and bringing like 8-year-old Ayelet who had a crush on Tommy.
Yeah.
And Tommy told me when I was 8, true story, comes up to me, looks me in the eyes and says, "Ayelet, I don't like you, not even a little bit. Get that through your thick
Ouch.
head." Right.
Oh, whoa, Tommy.
Whoa, Tommy. Whoa, Tommy.
Yeah.
Paying the price now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. God bless him.
Yeah.
But, that 8-year-old Ayelet took that experience and the lack of self-worth, the I'm not enough, that I'm not pretty, that I'm not, all those stories I told myself about myself, I didn't have the tools to be able to separate the experience from the meaning I attached to it. So I became the meaning that I attached to it. I
Mhm.
became the I'm not enough. I became the
Yeah.
I'm not valuable. I'm not pretty. Boys don't like me. I became that. And that
Mhm.
became my identity. And one thing I always teach when I speak manifestation talk is the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves become our reality.
Right. And
The
that's the work, is like undoing those stories.
is undoing those stories. So, like, is it true that Tommy didn't like me? Yeah, that was true. I'm not going to tell myself a false, I'm not going to tell myself an experience that didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
Does that have to mean that no boy is ever going to like me, or that I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not pretty, or I'm
Mhm.
not lovable? No,
Yeah.
one has nothing to do with the other. And I
Right.
think we spend our whole lives living out our future based on the meaning that we've attached to, traumatic experiences from the past, rather than like kind of zooming out, taking this bird's eye view and saying, hold on, wait a minute, like I'm living my life according to a lie, right?
Yeah. It's like having your shadow self driving the car on a road trip for too long and then realizing, when you're on a road trip and then you get really grumpy, like it's almost like out of nowhere. And then you're like, I'm starving, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I've been driving this car for 8 hours or whatever. And you forget, like, oh, wow, I can actually sit in the passenger seat and then let the other person drive, who's like more equipped. It's really like that with our higher selves too. Like, sometimes we get really activated, or when we're living this narrative that is not our truth and it's not for our highest good, we become like the worst versions of ourselves, or really stuck too. Like it's such a perfect storm, and it forces us to change. But it's really important to learn those tools, like how we teach with manifestation method, to love ourselves and um, really learn, even map out what the story is so that we can go beyond that and create the reality that we want.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a big part of like my evolution in doing this like deep therapeutic work has been like gotten me to this place in my life now where I'm no longer trying to like amputate the parts of me that are like not the pretty parts of me,
Wow,
right?
yes.
I think we spend a lot of time like, oh, why am I so reactive? Or, oh, why do I get angry? Or
Yeah, or
why
if I just stop doing this, yeah.
or if I just stop doing this, or if I eat
Mhm.
that, like, no, like, first off, humans are humans, and we're all going to have our array of like uncomfortable parts that come up. And it's
Yeah.
meant to be that way. We were designed this way. Everything is
Yes.
designed on purpose. And so, what's beautiful at this point, and like, I think also over the years, becoming a therapist has helped me kind of like recognize this work around trauma is I get to now take all these parts of me that are quote unquote less desirable and acknowledge them for doing their job at trying to protect me,
Mhm.
right? If I'm ever reactive or angry or jealous, right? No, there are no bad parts. There's nothing about any of us that is bad, so if we can learn to now have a new type of conversation with those parts. So for example, I remember when I was single before manifesting my husband, I find myself in these experiences where like girls around me would get engaged and
Mhm.
I experience the emotion of jealousy.
Mhm.
Right? I'd be happy for them, but I'd be a little bit like, hold on, why not me? Like I'm jealous.
Mhm.
And then I get frustrated at myself for being jealous. Like, oh, Ayelet, you're supposed to be a good person. Like, why can't you just be
Right. Like
happy for
that's
this?
such a low vibe, we should be happy for them. Yeah.
Right? But like, no, it's a very human reaction. And jealousy is there to serve a purpose. It's there to kind of teach me what it is that I do want. And then when I can see it as that, when I can see jealousy as this catalyst for giving me information to guide me in the direction of what I actually want. Oh, I do want love. I do want connection. I do want partnership. Now, from that place, because I'm no longer shaming the part of me that got jealous, right?
Mhm.
I'm no longer like trying to beat that part up, but
Yeah.
instead, I get to use it as just information. Now I can take that information and start to get creative with it.
Mhm.
Start to literally carve out whatever manifestation I want for myself. So, for those of you who are listening, when you see that person who's driving the car you want or living in the house you want, just notice the sensations that come up. Name it. If it's jealousy, it's jealousy. But don't let the jealousy pull you down into a low frequency where now you feel like a victim or you feel powerless. Instead, use that information and start creating momentum with it in the direction of manifesting what it is that you want for yourself.
Right, and also with jealousy, don't ever try to shame yourself for feeling jealous. Like when you're feeling activated in that sense and you're like, "Ooh, like I shouldn't be giving like whatever like evil eye on this person. I'm jealous of them." Like the power is the reframe, and the transformation is the reframe, and really being like, "Wow, I am feeling jealous right now." Like just being real about it and reframing it instead of shutting that down to be like, "Oh, like I'm jealous because I really want these things, or there's something like this that this situation or person is mirroring to me that maybe I'm denying myself that, and like, or denying that I want those things, and just be like, connect to it in a different way. Be like, wow, this God is showing me something that I really want that I am not calling in actively. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, totally. Like it reminds me, I just finished like a 7-week container where I took a group through my whole manifestation methodology from,
Mm-hmm.
from A to Z. And one of the things that we start to work on, I mean, we go into like the energetics a lot
Yeah.
and emotions and learning how to like work with these emotions in order to shift our frequencies into frequencies that actually start to create and manifest our realities. But
Mm-hmm.
it first starts with like getting acquainted with your thoughts because the average person thinks up to 80,000 thoughts per day. That breaks down to about 47 thoughts per minute. Now,
Wow.
that's a lot of thinking going on, but what's real crazy about that is
Mhm.
of the 47 thoughts per minute the average person thinks,
Mhm.
80% of that thinking we do tends to be negative.
Oof, that's stinking thinking. I tell you what.
Think like how can we
Yeah.
if our if where our thoughts go, energy flows, right?
Yes.
And thoughts are made out of particles, and particles
Mhm.
actually exist, and the thoughts we think start to program our electromagnetic field with information. So they're
Right, and it literally carves grooves in your brain. It's like how your each brain is so different because of the thoughts that we create in our brain.
totally, totally. And so, first getting acquainted with the 80% of negative thoughts I'm thinking, because how can we possibly manifest a positive outcome when our thoughts become things and 80% of what we're thinking is negative? So,
Mhm.
let's go back to like the control center and start to get acquainted with that. And so, in this course that I just completed, a lot of the women would say, "Oh, Ayelet, I'm just still thinking negative thoughts. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm thinking negative thoughts." And I'm like, okay, welcome to the club, right? You're
Yeah.
human. You're going to think the negative thoughts. Like, they're going to
Mhm.
be there,
Yeah.
right? But if you're already becoming aware of them, and then you can alchemize those thoughts into thoughts that actually make you feel good,
Mhm.
then you're winning. So the fact that you
Yeah.
can even become aware that you're thinking negative thoughts, you're already winning. That is,
Yes.
right?
Baby steps, it's all in those baby steps.
It's all in the baby steps, and of course it goes into like frequency and energetics, which I'd love to like explore in another episode because that's a
Yeah.
whole podcast in and of itself.
Mhm. The science of manifesting.
Science of manifesting. But yeah, so back to Israel life. I manifested my husband's. Well, I say I manifested, but I really, really live with like the premise that source is the one manifesting, God, divine divinity is the one manifesting. But we
Mhm.
have our role as co-creators, and we were placed on this planet with sovereignty, with the ability to create. We are creative beings. So we play a role in this manifestation dance. And so God manifested through me, my husband, in 21 days. So once I already got to Israel and I realized what I was doing there and that I was meant to be living there, at least for the time being,
Mhm. Yeah.
I was like ready to manifest my husband. And so I was sitting at a lunchroom with a few of my girlfriends. And at this point, I had done all the work leading up to this moment. Like I really worked on myself to get clear, like what is it I'm asking for? Like, and I worked on my belief, like knowing that I know my husband is coming this year. Like I just
Yeah.
knew, right?
Yeah.
And then I turned myself into a receiver, right? I surrendered. I learned how to receive and I learned how to put myself into a frequency of allowing, right? Oftentimes we block ourselves from allowing the thing that we desire to actually be magnetized and drawn into our field,
Yeah.
right? So I
We
worked on
think too, it's like so much of us of our conditioning is that we think we have to force something to happen or make it work or whatever, like put ourselves out there to make it happen. And we forget actually the most important part is getting into that receptive frequency and real and trusting. Like that's like so like high level.
trust is
Even if you feel like you have to fake it, if there's one thing that our listeners can take away from this podcast today, it's like if you just take out some time to maybe place your hand on your heart and your stomach and just be like, I trust myself, even if you feel like you've made every mistake in the world, like that is so important to starting your journey.
yeah.
And even when you're in the middle of the journey, I forget to trust myself all the time. It's a lifelong process.
But again, coming back to that, like noticing, right? That
Mhm.
awareness. Oh, right now I'm in a space where I'm not trusting myself. The fact that you could even notice it means that you can start the spiral in the direction of trusting yourself. Right?
Yes.
So, like, we're all going to have moments where we don't trust ourselves, where we're hard on ourselves, where we're feeling all the like judginess or jealousy or fear. I'm not enough, right? We're going to have those.
Mhm.
We're human. That's not the issue. The issue is when we let ourselves stay in that frequency longer than necessary.
Right.
So
There's
working
the
on
downward spiral and then there's the upward spiral, and hopefully we're all gonna be moving on an upward spiral.
if you're listening to this podcast, we're
Yeah,
all up together. Right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Ayelet, I feel like we should pause it there and then go into, like, manifesting barrel in the next episode. Like, go deeper into that.
okay, Mark,
Yeah,
if
so
you're
just Mark, is Mark here?
no, no, I'm
Oh, Mark
saying
oh, yeah, Mark, he's always here. He's always with us. Yeah, and then we can maybe even we want to even set up and more times this week to record if you feel like we're on a roll, and then we can set up something where it's like, okay, then and like we can take a break from recording and figure out how like strategize what the next steps are, and then you know what I'm saying? Like, 'cause
Yeah.
it's like the more we record, then we can have a break, and then we can launch, and then we can like give ourselves time to think about how we want to structure episodes.
Okay, fine. So whoever's editing this, if you heard this last bit that Aviva just mentioned, please cut that out of the episode. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't
Okay,
want
fine.
our listeners to know our master plan. We just want them to know, like, a little bit.
A little bit.
It's
So
something's coming.
something's coming. So okay, so let's what direction do we want to take it in now?
Okay, so, maybe do, like, a little, like, thank you so much for listening, like, we're continuing that we can't wait to, continue this story with you next week or, whatever,
Okay,
of,
fine.
like, manifesting love, like, of the
Okay.
Ayelet story.
Okay. Okay, so I feel like I jam-packed this episode with so much of my story, and it's like still such like the bird's eye view of like the last however many years of my life that I've been on this journey and that I've been on planet Earth. And each of these pieces has so much depth that we can go into. So we're going to save it for future episodes,
Absolutely.
including how I manifested my husband in 21 days, like the actual methodology to it, because there are step-by-step pieces that are important. And I really do feel for anyone who's really looking to like attract love, finally, like there is a methodology and it's possible for you. If it happened for me, it can happen for you. So
Absolutely, and we can't rush a good story, We can't
and
just have the bullet points, we need a little bit more juice.
that's right. So we're leaving y'all with the cliffhanger.
And we'll
Okay.
see you guys next week.
And we'll see you guys next week. And also, if any of you want a actual downloadable that I would love to give to you, I've created a mini manifestation workshop, including a deep hypno visualization process. In fact, the exact one that I used to manifest my husband. So that will be linked in the show notes below this episode. So go ahead and enjoy that. And if you like this episode and you want more like it, please go ahead and 5-star this episode and share it with your friends so we can share the love. Thanks so much for listening. Happy
Thanks, bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me on the manifestation method. I hope today's episode has inspired you on your journey to authenticity and abundance. Remember, your transformation begins with your mindset. If you're ready to take the next step, visit ayeletpolonsky.com for more resources and guidance. Until next time, here's to your rising.